Hello, we're going to get into concretism today because our last couple of videos were talking about where they hinted at abstract and concrete sensation and abstract and concrete intuition, which I am thinking abstract sensation may sometimes be mistaken for intuition, and concrete intuition may sometimes be mistaken for sensation. So let's get into the definition from Psychological Types by Carl Jung of concretism. By this term, I understand a definite peculiarity of thought and feeling which represents the antithesis to abstraction. The actual meaning of concrete is grown together. A concretely thought concept is one that has grown together or coalesced with other concepts. Such a concept is not abstract, not isolated, and independently thought, but always impure and related. It is not a differentiated concept, but is still embedded in the sense-conveyed material of perception. Okay, so a concretely thought concept is kind of intermingled with sense-conveyed material of perception. So it's not like a standalone thought. Concretistic thinking moves among exclusively concrete concepts and views. It is constantly related to sensation. Similarly, concretistic feeling is never free from sensuous relatedness. Primitive thinking and feeling are exclusively concretistic. They are always related to sensation. The thought of the primitive has no detached independence, but clings to the material phenomenon. The most he can do is to raise it to the level of analogy. Primitive feeling is always equally related to the material phenomenon. To me, that's the difference between saying it's almost like concrete thought or feeling has to be backed up by something that's rooted in the senses or material that's detected via sensation. If I say it's wrong to kill, that is a standalone concept. But if I say, well, when people kill, it causes lots of harm, that proves that killing is wrong. So you've rooted that concept in something that's already gone before or something that we can observe. So it's almost like it's backed up by proof in the sense domain. And then the highest form of that, he's saying, is an analogy. So I might say, imagine if someone just came and killed somebody who you loved. How can you think that that's okay? So the analogy kind of brings to life, it kind of brings a concept to life, but it's concretism because I'm still relating it to sensuous material. I might not have explained that very well, but primitive feeling is always equally related to the material phenomenon. His thought and feeling depend upon sensation and are only faintly differentiated from it. Concretism, therefore, is an archaism. The magical influence of the fetish is not experienced as a subjective state of feeling, but sensed as a magical effect. This is the concretism of feeling. Concretism of feeling, so again, rooted in the sensuous. If you feel that something's wrong, it becomes concrete when physical sensations in the body accompany that. Or something happens in the external world that backs up that feeling. So say, for example, if you read in tarot cards, okay, which I like to do, but if all of a sudden you dropped all of your cards, you were already feeling something, but then you dropped your cards and you attach a big idea to that. Not just, oh, I'm feeling this, but I dropped my cards, but that hasn't had an effect on what I'm feeling. If that had a big effect on what you were feeling, well, that proves that my feeling is right. That's actually concrete feeling. The primitive does not experience the idea of divinity as a subjective content, but the sacred tree is the habitat, nay, even the deity himself. This is concretism of thinking. With civilized man, concretism of thought consists in the inability to conceive of anything which differs from the immediately obvious external facts, or in the inability to discriminate subjective feeling from the sense-given object. So an example of that would be, I feel like that's wrong, therefore it's wrong, rather than I feel like that's wrong, but it might not be wrong, it's just the way I feel. Concretism is a concept which falls under the more general concept of participation mystique. Just as participation mystique represents a fusion of the individual with outer objects, so concretism represents a mixing up of thought and feeling with sensation. It is a state of concretism when the object of thinking and feeling is at the same time also an object of sensation. This coalescence prevents a differentiation of thought and feeling, anchoring both functions within the sphere of sensation, i.e., sensuous relatedness. Accordingly, they can never be developed into pure functions, but must always remain the mere retainers of sensation. The result of this is a predominance of the factor of sensation in the psychological orientation. Concerning the importance of the factor of sensation versus sensation, see types. The disadvantage of concretism is the subjection of function to sensation. Because sensation is the perception of physiological stimuli, concretism either rivets the function to the sphere of sense or constantly leads it back there. The effect of this is a sensual subjection of the psychological functions, favoring the influence of external facts at the expense of individual psychic autonomy. From the standpoint of the recognition of facts, this orientation is, of course, valuable, but from the standpoint of the interpretation of facts and their relation to the individual, it is definitely prejudicial. Concretism produces a state where facts gain the paramount importance, thereby suppressing the individuality and its freedom in favor of the objective process. But since the individual is not only determined by physiological stimuli, but also by factors which may even be opposed to the external fact, concretism affects a projection of these inner factors into the outer fact, thus provoking an almost superstitious overvaluation of mere facts, as is precisely the case with the primitive. So it's talking there about the necessary subjective processes that go on. If you're a concrete thinker, it's hard to know when those subjective forces are really, really strong. So, for example, in his example about the actually worshipping a tree and believing it's a deity, so that person has got an idea in his unconscious maybe about, you know, the idea of God, that there is a deity, there is a force in the world, okay? And he's looking at the tree, interfacing with the object. His subjective processes are telling him that a deity exists. So rather than him thinking, well, this is a tree and a deity exists, he projects the idea of the deity, the subconscious stuff, into the object in front of him, the tree. So because I'm looking at this tree and I'm also thinking about deities, that must mean that this tree is a deity. So whereas we tend to think, oh, concrete thinkers are very much about facts and reality. Yeah, they are. But because they're so much about facts, external facts, and less about subjective, they're at risk of failing to recognize when subjective things are going on. So they're more likely to be superstitious because they're projecting that into the external object. So concrete thinking, far from it being about, you know, rational, but, you know, we're dealing with facts here, so it's rational. Actually, it can become very irrational because of the person's need to project the subjective matter into the external object. A good example of this is seen in Nietzsche, whose concretism of feeling resulted in an excessive valuation of diet. The materialism of Moleschott is a similar instance. He said, man is what he eats. An example of the superstitious overvaluation of facts is also provided by the hypostasizing of the concept of energy in the monism of Ostwald.